All right, looks like we're right at about 1:30, so we can go ahead and get started. The team wants to go ahead and turn on their cameras and stuff. All right, looks good. Perfect. Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Nixon. I currently have the opportunity to serve as the project manager for our team. We have been partnered this past year with Baptist Memorial Healthcare, and our job has been to create a simulation that predicts emergency department arrivals within their flagship hospital within Memphis, Tennessee. Katie Parker has served as our industry partner for the project, and she also serves as the regional director of performance with Baptist. I'm also joined today by my project team, Matthew Murry, Jacob Kinney, Hawkin, Starke, and Chang. We want to start off by first thanking Katie for being here, one, and also just for the incredible work she's done with our team this past year. She's been an incredible resource throughout the entire year with all the information that she's provided us, as well as the consultations for our background research, our initial analysis, and throughout the entirety of all the technical work that we did throughout our process. So Katie, thank you so much for being here. We'll get a chance to hear from her a little bit later in the presentation. But just to go ahead and get started, the emergency department that is located at the Memphis Hospital campus, they see tens of thousands of patients every year, and they're constantly seeking to improve their processes within the ED. Our team will focus on the front end process of the emergency department, which includes a patient's arrival, their registration, triage, and concludes with their provider first contact. Within this process, as well as all their others, Baptist is constantly seeking to provide a high quality of patient care within a reasonable amount of time. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to my project partner, June, and he's going to talk a little bit about Baptist.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, so our industry partner, Baptist Memorial Healthcare, was founded in 1912 in Memphis, Tennessee. It is a large hospital system operating 22 hospitals across Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas. This healthcare system operates a number of clinics and other specialty facilities alongside the hospitals. For example, the system includes the Baptist Heart Institute, Women's and Children's Health Center, Baptist Cancer Centers, and Rehabilitation Centers. Baptist Memorial Women's and Children's Health Care Center is a freestanding women's hospital that features a Level 3 newborn intensive care unit, labor and delivery, and pediatric service. Pediatric service include the new Spence and Becky Wilson Baptist Children's Hospital, opened in 2015, which is attached to Women's Hospital. It offers a 17,000 square foot pediatric emergency room with 10 patient care bays and 2,000 square foot diagnostic area. Among all Baptist Memorial campus and service, we focused on the main hospital campus and its emergency department. The main hospital campus of Baptist Memorial is located in Memphis, Tennessee. It is built in 1979 and has total area of 1,374,650 square feet. There are 652 beds for entire hospital. The main campus is the only hospital in the region that does heart transplant, which means there are specialties like cardio, neuro in Memphis. This campus is home to Baptist Memorial Women's and Children's Hospital, Baptist Memorial Restorative Care Hospital, and Baptist Heart Institute. Our focus is the emergency department, which is scaled down version of a complete hospital campus while still offering the full extent of care given to patients in need. Baptist Memorial's emergency department are currently available with all emergency service, and they see more than 65,000 patients per year. According to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service, the ED at Baptist Memorial Healthcare is ahead of state and national hospital ED in terms of quality measures. For example, the time before admission of Baptist Memorial is well ahead of national and state average. However, there are still problems at the ED, which are extended patient wait time and left without being seen cases. Our focus is to analyze data and create a simulation model that predicts patients' arrival to improve the system performance. Now I'm going to hand it over to Matt, and he'll talk about the factors that contribute to the difficult nature of staffing.
Thank you, June. So when a patient enters the emergency department system, they will experience the front end process of the ED, which includes things like registration and triage, where a patient's acuity level is determined. Acuity is the level of severity of a patient and affects the amount of time that that patient will wait in queues and time spent in the system. Acuity is assigned to every patient as they go through the registration process of the ED. A patient can have acuity from 1 to 5, while level 3s can either be a vertical 3 or a horizontal 3. A vertical 3 is a patient that can be fast-tracked and doesn't require a bed, while a horizontal 3 is a patient that will require a bed due to their severe acuity before being seen by a provider. Acuity is also used to determine if a patient should be transferred to a bed or fast-tracked, and that's what I meant earlier by moving through the system as fast as possible. Lower severity patients are fast tracked when possible, which means seeing a provider, but they're not actually using resources in the system, which is ideal as the queue times will be shortened if these patients can be fast tracked. Ambulance arrivals have a slightly different approach to the registration and triage processes due to the emergency nature of the patient arrival, where ambulance arrival patients will be registered in the back and triaged as soon as possible when arriving to the ED to have their acuity level determined, and these patients will most likely take up a better room due to their severe acuity. Next, I'll be talking about some of the causes and effects that we discovered when we were analyzing the Baptist ED system. So one of the main outputs that Baptist wanted from the project was to find a better way to schedule nurses to handle the ED being overwhelmed with patients at one time and to reduce patients leaving without being seen by a provider. We created a fishbone diagram to identify reasons the ED was experiencing these extended patient wait times and patients leaving without being seen in the system. So some of these causes for this is that the patient arrivals are currently uncertain in the ED system, which can cause delays for all patients, as well as when there are too many patients for nurses to handle at once at these high density arrival times. Level 3 acuity patients are known in the ED as time hogs due to the amount of testing and analysis required to treat them, usually coming in with problems that could be a multitude of things that are affecting them. Nurse schedules often shift change at high density arrival times like lunch or midnight, and usually these times that patients are gonna, like I was talking about earlier, overload the ED with waves. And so this nurse scheduling is usually at these high density arrival times, which is unideal for the system, because like I said, it can cause delays for all patients involved. All of these previous occurrences that I've been talking about have led to the conclusion of inaccurately staffing the ED can lead to an underutilization of the nursing staff, as well as extended patient wait times for high and low severity patients. Now I'll be handing it off to Hawkin, who will be discussing some of our initial data analysis that was done.
Thanks, Matt. So the timeline at the bottom of this slide is going to display the time intervals that we used to create the graph shown on all the following slides. The data for each of these time intervals was provided to us by our industry contact, Katie Parker, and she made clear to us that when she delivered the data, that's real world data, which is going to mean there's plenty of missing data points or data points collected in error, and we removed those from the data being presented today. So the following graphs are all formatted using the same x-axis, hour of week in which the patient arrives, and each day is marked by the orange bar, which marks midnight. The graph displays the average wait time for patients experiencing the ED. An artificial ceiling has been placed on the points that make up these graphs to mitigate the effects of any data collected in error. So the longest realistic wait time that we tolerated within the data set was 4 hours, and all wait times longer than that were removed. So I would like to reiterate one more time that the x-axis is hour of week in which the patient arrives, not necessarily in which the action that's under scrutiny is occurring. So when patients arrive, they're entered into the system. At the end of the registration process, their movement throughout the emergency department is then timed from then on. The average total wait time is measured as the time from when the patient arrives to provider first contact, and then you're going to subtract out the triage time the patient occurs. So with all that said, wait time is going to be influenced by the arrival rate of patients and the number of nurses available in the ED. This graph is formatted identically to the previous one and displays the average triage time by hour of week. We learned from our industry contact again, Katie Parker, what the realistic maximum triage time would be, and that's 10 minutes. So all triage times above 10 minutes were deemed to be collected in error, and again, they were removed. The triage time is the time elapsed when gathering information on the patient's current medical condition and determining the course of treatment needed to best aid their condition. So overall, there's not much variation across triage times by hour of the week. However, there is some room for improvement if the flow of nurses between patients is somehow enhanced. Now I'll move on to describe a major point of concern for the stakeholders of the system. So LWBS, which was mentioned before, stands for left without being seen. This means a patient exits the emergency department without receiving treatment from a healthcare provider, generally due to an extended wait time and they decide to leave. LWBS can happen at any time between registration and provider first contact. Patients who leave without being seen not only pose a threat to their own health, but a threat to the future health of the entire emergency department, because a patient who leaves without being treated by a healthcare professional is more likely to return to the ED at a later date with a worsened condition, therefore demanding more resources from the ED staff. So regular occurrences of this are going to result in additional wait times for arriving patients. That's going to in turn increase the number of LWBS, which creates a negative feedback loop for the system. The national standard for LWBS is 5%. Baptist Memorial's goal specifically is 2%, and the ideal goal, as defined by our industry contact Katie Parker, is 0.5%. So to compare, Baptist Memorial's current rate as of 2019 was 4.414%. This is below the national average and pretty close to their end goal. LWBS is primarily driven by average waiting time, which is again determined by the balance between arrivals and the nursing staff on hand. And by creating more arrival-driven nursing schedules, we should be able to lower the LWBS closer to, if not under, Baptist Memorial's goal of 2%, and in turn lessen the occurrence of negative patient health outcomes within the system. So before moving into further development of our simulation model, we did want to confirm that the average wait time for patients correlates with the number of left without being seen in the way that we thought. The graph above displays the wait time experienced by patients on the x-axis, and then the cumulative count of left without being seen on the y-axis. So again, an artificial cap of 4 hours was placed on the wait time to mitigate the effects of data points collected in error. Again, this cap was chosen based on the largest realistic wait time a patient might experience. So as you can see, as the wait time increases, so too does the count of left without being seen, and much of this volume occurs between 40 and 140 minutes. Therefore, our goal mainly would be to reduce patient wait time as close to or below 40 minutes as we can. And the trend shown within the graph does support the idea that as wait time increases, patients are more likely to leave, resulting in left without being seen. Therefore, we think we can move forward with our assumptions as they are and begin work on the simulation model. I'll now pass it off on to Jacob, who will discuss the techniques we applied to investigate seasonality within the data.
All right, so Hawkin talked about some of the initial data analysis we did, but moving forward towards the simulation model, we needed to look at scheduling the arrivals of those patients into our simulation model. So to do that, we needed to look at the seasonality. We collaborated with Dr. Liu, which we produced an R code that broke down the average week, month, hour, and average week by hour of the day for like an entire week. As you can see here on the graphs, we have an average week with the arrivals by hour. We have an average hour, the difference in months, and the difference by day of the week. So what we really took from this, the overarching, was that the months were different, and we knew that once we could work our way down from months to weeks to days and hours. So on the next slide, I will talk about the statistical testing we did to break down the months into groups per seasonality. All right, so first we ran a variance test, and we found that we could not assume equal variance. So we went and ran a Games How method test with 98% confidence. We ran this for each month to compare the difference between the 12 months, and we found 3 groupings within the Games How method, which you can see here on the left. There is an A, B, and C group. On the top right here, you can see an interval plot that shows the difference in the months going through the year. But on the bottom right shows how we ended up with our seasonality of the 5 different groups. Before we got to the bottom right, we had to look at both the Games How method, but Furthermore, we had to look at what our industry partner told us with the emergency department arrivals and the different seasons for that. So we didn't want to put September and January together like the Games How method on the left says, because we knew that January is part of the flu season for the emergency department, and September is a transition between the trauma season and the fall. And with that, you have different injuries and illnesses, which could change the arrival patterns with like what time of day it is and with the types of injuries. So we ended up with the bottom right, which shows the flu season that is December, January, and February. We had a transition month of March going into trauma, which is April through August. We had another transition month in September going into the fall with October and November. So with this, we created our 5 different schedules for each. We used the average arrivals by hour of the day and day of the week in our arena simulation model to create the arrivals coming into the model. All right, so once we had the arrivals, we had to assign acuity levels to these incoming patients in our system. So to do that, we ran another variance test. We found that we could use equal variance. We ran a Fisher LSD method with 98% confidence. On the left, you can see we ran it by hour of the day. There was 7 different groupings, and after talking with Dr. Rossetti, it was hard to find any consecutive hours and group them together. Even though it says there were 7 groupings, it goes from 9 to 10, 1, 8, and they're kind of bouncing all over the place. So what we ended up doing was we just went ahead and broke all 24 hours on their own. But on the top right, you can see we did another Fisher LSD method, and we looked at day of the week. Now, this shows 2 different groupings, but what we ended up doing after looking at this interval plot, Monday was a little bit lower than Tuesday through Friday, even though they said they were in the same grouping by the Fisher LSD test. We went ahead and just broke that out on its own. That way we wouldn't bring down that average of Tuesday through Friday. So what that would look like later, Matt will talk about, is how we assign those acuities. It will be based off of what day type it is, if it's Monday, Tuesday through Friday, or Saturday through Sunday, and what hour it is. But now June will talk about some of the next processes that came after assigning these acuity levels.
Thank you, Jacob. So after each patient go through the process of arrival and acuity assignment, they are finally ready to enter into the ED. They have 2 more steps to go. The first step is the registration process. Our industry partner gave us the distribution for the time, which takes for each patient to be registered. It is triangular distribution with a minimum of 2 minutes, an average of 4 minutes, and a maximum of 6 minutes. Once the registration process is done, the patient has to wait until an available nurse comes to find him and will proceed to the triage process. We use the input analyzer in Arena to create the distribution for the triage process, and the distribution for the time that takes for triage is log normal distribution, as shown on the top right. And there was no significant seasonality. The registration and triage process are relatively straightforward within the simulation model, which will be introduced later in the presentation. There's one thing necessarily to be added to each of these processes while dictating the flow of patients. That is lower acuities. Once again, that is more severe patients are given priority in both processes. More severe patients obviously have a shorter timeline to be treated before being critical status, and therefore they need to go through the system more quickly. In addition to the information about the distribution, the table at the bottom of the slide shows the grouping information using Fisher LSD method with 98% confidence. The reason we use the Fisher LSD with 98% confidence is to verify that triage does not vary based on season or specific time period. We ran a Fisher LSD test on seasons, and it reassured that there is not a significant difference in their average means. Next, we'll finally start focusing on our simulation model. Based on our data analysis and translation as shown previously, we built a simulation model of patient flow within the ED. The graphic in this slide shows the overview of the simulation model. When a patient arrives at the ED, the patient will enter into the system and will be immediately assigned acuity. After acuity assignment, the patient will go through two process modules, which are registration and triage process. Then the patient will be directed into one of two paths. A decision module is used here to determine whether the patient is fast-tracked or follow the standard protocol. The decision based on the acuity level of the patient. If the acuity level 1, 2 is or horizontal 3, it means the patient's condition requires extensive care and immediate treatment. For acuity levels 4, 5, and vertical 3, the patient is to be fast-tracked as his condition is likely to be easily. In the simulation model, we have two resources that constrain the entity. They are the number of nurses on staff and the number of beds and rooms Baptist ED has access to. So we use both of them at front-end process, but when it comes to the back-end process, the only resource is the number of beds and rooms because we do not know the distribution for how long nurses are occupied for each patient. Next, I'll pass it to Matt again, and he'll continue talking about the simulation model.
Sorry, I was muted. The top flow diagram is representative of a submodel within our arena simulation. And the concept of this submodel is that an entity is created so that it can keep up with the time within the actual model. The entity was split into two so that it could keep up with what day type, V day type, as well as keep up with what hour of the day it is, V day, as Jacob mentioned previously. If you look at the middle diagram, it's a snipping of our expression E acuity that we created, where you can see that the array is 3 by 24, but that was too large to put on the slide, so we snip it down to only show a 3 by 4. In this array, there is the V-day type in the rows, which goes as follows. The V-day type is 1, which is a Monday. V-day type is 2, which is a Tuesday through Friday. And V-day type 3 is equal to Saturday through Sunday, as well as the columns, which are V hour, are each hour of the day type, totaling 24 hours for each day. And the rows are based on our groupings and our seasonality that we discussed earlier for our week. If you look at the bottom expression, it's a representation of our A acuity expression that assigns that attribute to each entity that enters the system. The assign module uses that E acuity expression, and depending on what V day type and V hour it is, it will index into the expression and pull out what discrete probability to use and assign an acuity level to the incoming patient. Next, I am going to talk about severe acuity patients and what that means when they go through the front end process of the ED. So, like I mentioned previously, acuity determines how long an entity will be in the system by queue times being prioritized by more severe patients to an extent. So in our model, we have redefined, first of all, acuity for level 3 patients, as there are two types previously mentioned, standing threes and horizontal threes. To accurately assign this acuity, our team had to redefine these level 3s and in the model as numbers, making level 3 acuity the horizontal and 3.5 the vertical 3s from before, just to make it so the simulation can read it and understand it and we can work with it better. So these severe acuity levels, which are level 1s and level 2s, take precedence in the model for the registration and triage process delays in our simulation. And what I mean by that is if you have a varying group of acuity level 1 to 5 patients and they're all going through the registration process, the order of it would be 1s take priority over 2, and 2s take priorities over 3 through 5, and 3 through 5 are just put in the queue as they arrive to the queue. Visuals were also used in our model by the entities in queue, being shown going throughout the model to each process module and waiting in queues with other entities. And so that's just for verification of our model, that we can see our patients going from process to process and see them waiting in queues. We also built an acuity error counter, which was designed to verify the acuity assignment portion of our model to make sure entities were only getting assigned accurate acuities from 1 to 5. And now I'll be handing it over to Jacob, who will discuss further validation of our system.
All right, so Matt talked about some of the verification forms of our model, which is just showing that our model is running how we told it to run. But we needed to look at validation, which is more of, are the outputs we're getting from the model accurate to the real world? So to start with that, we needed to look at the arrivals since we put so much work into that seasonality and everything. So after talking with Dr. Rossetti, we thought it would be hard to statistically test some of this. So it would be a good idea to just get a visual. On the top graph, we're looking at January, February, and December. And from our R code, we got an average week by showing the average arrivals by day throughout an entire, or average arrivals by hour through an entire week. We plotted a graph here. And then we took that same season from our simulation model and got the output from that, and we graphed that as well so that you could see the comparison between the top and the bottom, when the bottom being our simulation. As a team, we thought this did pretty well, but you're going to see some highs and lows, and that's due to the random number generation. All right. So furthering with validation, we were focused on the front end more than anything. So I wanted to show how we validated from registration to triage. When talking with Katie Parker, our point of contact, she talked about how there's human error involved with a lot of this data, with the nurse not pushing the button maybe at the right time, forgot to do something. So to smooth out some of that error, we thought it was better to start from the beginning of registration to the end of triage instead of individually trying to validate each one. How we did that was we took a random time interval in our January, February, and December model here from a Tuesday from 12 to 1600 or 12 to 4 p.m. We took those outputs, and then we took random days from either January, February, and December in 2018 or 2019. And we ran a 2-sample t-test with an alpha of 0.02, and we compared it to that simulation output. You can see here, there is a December and then January and February. You can see that the alpha value is smaller than all 3 of the p-values, so we didn't find any significant difference, and this just gave some more validity to our model. Now Matt's going to talk about the outputs, what we got from our model, and how our industry partner can use them.
Thanks, Jacob. So following the process of verification and validation, we were then able to begin analyzing some of the output that the simulation was providing for us. So the graph on the screen shows it's representing the maximum number of people in queue at any given time as they're waiting to go through the triage process. So our hope for the simulation is that Katie and her team will be able to use the simulation model to reduce some of these queue lengths in the future. Within the model's output, it is also built in that throughout any hour of the day, throughout any day of the week, Katie and her team can go in and analyze how long that queue is at any given time, meaning that this can be used to adjust nurse scheduling to help reduce some of those queue lengths as well. This is automatically output within the arena model once the model has been run for a certain period of time. So using the model and by analyzing how busy the ED is at any given time, we hope that Katie and her team will be able to assist the nursing manager who does create the schedule of nurses at any given time to help best staff the emergency department. This will be the way that they can best staff it, is ensuring that they're providing for all the patients accordingly, but also best utilizing their nursing staff at any given time. So now I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about how this graph correlates with the patient wait time that we are outputting from our model as well. So similar to the queue length graph, this graph is an estimate of the maximum time that a patient will wait in the ED in the current system. This estimate is based on the average amount of time spent in a queue and the number of people that are in that queue at the time that they are waiting. So as we previously discussed in the presentation, patients who are experiencing an exacerbated wait time are also prone to leaving the ED without being seen by a provider, which is not only dangerous to the patient, but also will cause a negative feedback loop for the emergency department in the future when that patient inevitably returns to receive treatment for their condition. So this wait time graph can also be used with the queue length graph to help Katie and her team better improve the overall patient experience and utilize her staff within the front end department of the emergency department. So with that being said, I'm going to move into just a couple recommendations that we have for Katie and her team moving throughout the future, and then also have a chance to hear from Katie and her experience that we've had with the project. But first off, some of the recommendations that we do have is we think it's going to be beneficial for the Baptist ED team to add a new time checkpoint within the system so that it's better established when the nurse is with the patient and what activity is being conducted while they are with the patient at that time. That will, one, help analyze better how the nurse's time is being spent at any given time, as well as help eliminate some of those data points that are collected in error at any given time. The next recommendation we have is we also think it'd be beneficial for Katie and her team to separate the fast track process from the process of patients being placed into a bed. This will help with a number of things. The first being, we think it'll be better for them to analyze how much time the fast track process is actually saving, and also allow them to differentiate between the patients that are spending time in the ED for longer amounts of time, or when they're waiting in a waiting room or another area rather than taking up bed space. So at this point, we actually are going to go ahead and have our industry partner, Katie, talk a little bit about her experience with the project and the impact that she feels the project will have on the Baptist Memorial Healthcare System here in the future. So Katie.
Thank you, Matt. So first, I want to say thank you to this team. They have been a delight to work with this past year. This team is very organized and have stayed the course on the project. They have really impressed me with the questions they have asked and the understanding that they have grasped on this problem presented to them. The deep analysis and modeling of this project will definitely help us. The setup of this model is something that we're going to want to upkeep in future months and future years, and continue to use this data in this model to help us redefine our staffing model. Right now, we're at a very static staffing model. We want to move to a more dynamic staffing model. This will definitely help us. And also for us to look at those responsibilities at the front end of operations of our ED to help minimize some of the wait time that the model can show us what we'll have. So we really appreciate this.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
So with that being said, I'll go ahead and summarize here with a little bit more of just future work that we think could be done for the model, and then finally just summarize the presentation as a whole here in just a second. But future work with our project, we feel as though it'd be beneficial for the team, whether that be a future Capstone team or Katie and her team, to completely model the back end of the emergency department just to better understand how certain health conditions affect the model and affect patient wait time or patient stay time, and see how this also affects the other front end processes within the model. With that being said, I'll go ahead and summarize the presentation for us here. So from the beginning, like we said, Baptist Memorial Healthcare is a large hospital system based out of Memphis, Tennessee. The main emergency department, which we focused on, sees over 65,000 patients a year. The front end process of the emergency department is very difficult to staff due to the varying arrival rates and the different severity levels of patients who are arriving at the emergency department. Our team throughout this past year has created a simulation model which accurately creates arriving patients of varying severity. And this can be used to help determine queue lengths and wait times of patients and hopefully start to minimize some of those a little bit. And finally, we are hopeful that our industry partner is able to use this simulation in the future to determine their staffing needs by hour of the day of the week, and season of the year. So with that being said, we just want to once again thank everybody for joining us today, and especially thank Katie for being here. We've thoroughly enjoyed this project throughout this past year, and it's been an absolute delight to work with her and her team. But at this point, we'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions. Thank you.